I'm Jeremy. Nice to see you guys all again. Alright, so last time we talked about Greece and Rome and all the different awesomeness in that. So now we just finished with the fall of the Roman Empire, which was kind of sad. So here we go, Dark Ages. So first, in general, we're going to be talking about the Middle Ages, and then we're going to be talking about the Renaissance. And we're not going to really focus on the Renaissance. We're gonna focus on the different aspects, different kind of important things that happen here and there, but not the general Renaissance. So if that's what you're looking for, wrong place. If you want to find other stuff like that, go see the Ninja Turtles, Raphael, Donatello, Michelangelo, and Leonardo. They can all help you over there. So here we go. Middle Ages. So Middle Ages has 3 points. The first point is called the Dark Ages. The second point is called the High Middle Ages. The third part is going to be called the Late Middle Ages. And then in the Late Middle Ages, it's sort of iffy about whether the Renaissance started there or it just had like an immediate starting point. We can't really pinpoint when the Renaissance officially started. So here we go, Dark Ages. So Christianity is booming, all right? After Constantine said Christianity is cool, it skyrocketed, and after it became legal, it skyrocketed even further. So now everyone was Christian. And so now that's good, but now Christianity sort of has like a rival, and it's Islam. And Islam's about Muhammad and seeing God and seeing the angel Gabriel and being able to tell everyone that there's only one God. And then he got kind of kicked out and he came back in and whatever. But yeah, he was a major player, Muhammad, in the entire Muslim religion. So kind of duh, but whatever. So early Christianity was called Arianism, and Arianism basically said Jesus was a lesser divinity than God. So like he was godlike, but he wasn't as godly as God, you know. And so you wonder, like, okay, where's Catholicism playing to this? No, Catholicism isn't Arianism. One general difference. Catholicism believed that JC and God were like the same. Like that's where we get the Father, the Son, the Holy Spirit. So that's Catholicism. But right now we have Arianism. So we have these Christian warriors who start spreading Christianity by means of force. So the first guy we have is Clovis, and Clovis establishes a Western Empire, and he founds what is called the Merovingian dynasty, and he's what you'd call the founder of the Franks, and the Franks were basically, if the Romans were still alive, they'd call them barbarians, but whatever, the Romans are dead, so screw them. So you have these Frank guys, and they're conquering, and they're killing all these people, and they're saying you will become Christian or we kill you. And so if you were smart, you would say I'm Christian. If you're not, you're done. And Clovis really considered it his duty to really to convert everyone to Christianity. So later he has his dynasty keeps going, and then then you have this guy named Charles Martel, and Charles Martel he's known as Charles the Hammer. So, what he's really famous for is, first of all, he lays the groundwork for the Carolingian dynasty of the Franks, but he's really famous for the Battle of Tours. So the Muslims have been conquering a lot, and they've gone around Africa, they've got to Egypt, so from Saudi Arabia all the way down, getting to North Africa, they're moving up, they cross the Strait of Gibraltar, and then you have they're getting to Spain, and so the Christians are kind of getting worried, like, oh, okay, these Muslims are getting awfully close. They're already taking down Spain, and now they might get closer. So Charles Martel goes over there, and they have this huge fight, and eventually the Moors are kind of the Spanish Muslims, as you know what they call themselves. The Moors are stopped, and they're pushed back into Spain, and one of the biggest, there are many moments in history where, like, if the complete opposite of a certain action occurred, the rest of human history would be completely altered and completely changed. This is one of those moments, because if Charles Martel lost that battle, then the Muslims would have conquered the rest of Europe, and there will be no more Christians, and that would kind of change the rest of human history. So, thanks Charles Martel, I think. Anyway, the Moors, they go back to Spain. They're pushed back into Spain, and that's why Spanish culture is also a mixture of Muslim influence. So, like, Olay is kind of praying to Allah, and also ojalá, like in Spanish, like ojalá que whatever, which means I hope. It's oh Allah, like Allah. So that's how Muslims had influence over Spain. Then we have the son of the hammer, the little hammer. Pepin the Short, not to be confused with Pippin of the Lord of the Rings, who was just the guy who always craves about second breakfast or fifth lunch or whatever. Hungry dude. So he officially starts the Carolingian dynasty. And another good thing that he does is he forms an alliance with the Pope. And that's really good, because the Pope at this time is kind of like the king of Europe. Or like, there's so many Christians. Europe is basically all Christian, except the Jews, but whatever. Europe is all Christian, that basically the Pope, who's like the king of Christianity at the time, basically owns all of Europe. If you don't like the Pope, you're in trouble, bub. So he quickly makes an alliance with the Pope, and that's really good. So then we get this guy named Charles the Great. And you'll know him because of his French name, Charlemagne, or basically Charlemagne. My French is awful. Sorry, I don't speak French. Charlemagne is the next king, and he has the same sort of thing for Clovis. He wants to Christianize everyone, and eventually the Pope Leo III invites him in 800 to come over and for a little ceremony. It turns out he's actually knighting Charlemagne to be the Holy Roman Emperor. That's sort of like it's like the new Roman Empire, but it's not really. So it's kind of sad, but whatever. So the Holy Roman Empire is founded. That's great. So so he eventually he becomes a Holy Roman Emperor, and he decides to he kind of is a guy who has a thirst for knowledge. He started off like not knowing anything. He didn't even know how to read or write, and towards the end of his life, he started learning those sort of objects. So it just shows that religion has had a huge influence over him, because he wanted to study the Bible. He wanted to read it. He wanted to understand it. So if you're in my class and you're writing, the final essay question is, how does religion affect human history? Well, it's because it made certain people want to embrace Christianity, like Charlemagne. He wanted to learn more, and he's also a guy who sort of creates an empire after Rome. So now, you have the Greeks, and then you have the Macedonians, and you have the Persians, and then you have Rome, and then now you have the Holy Roman Empire. So it's kind of like the Roman Empire. What they say, it's like the Roman Empire because of all its might and strength, and with the power of spirituality with JC and God and all that stuff. So then later you have this guy named Louis the Pious, and Louis the Pious has 3 kids, and as 3 kids, like everything, they decided to split the empire up, and so the Treaty of Verdun sort of does in 843. That's what you need to know about the Holy Roman Empire. So another thing that's really important is feudalism. So feudalism rose during the Dark Ages. So what that basically is alright. Here are my lucky pens. Okay. You have this circle is your land. I'm just gonna use a different marker because this marker sucks. So I have this king. So I'm the king, actually. Now, I'm not really good at defending, and I know there's some other dudes who want this territory. They want it. So what do? I get soldiers, or I get protection. Well, how do I do that? What is it in for the other dudes who want it? So what I'm going to say is, this dude, one dude I'm going to give this chunk of land. Another dude I'm going to give this chunk of land. And this chunk of land, and this chunk of land, and all these. So I'm going to give to so many people. And if I give land to them, then they're going to protect me. They're going to provide troops. They're going to give me political support. So that's really the benefit. That's really what feudalism is. So you have all these different. Well, you give it to all these different people, and so those who kind of receive. For the king, he kind of he gives the land to lords, nobility, clergymen, and so now this land that you get from the king, or from anybody, is called a manor, and so you own it. Now it's yours. You get to keep it. And at this time, land was money. If you had land, you had money. If you didn't have land, you didn't have money. All right. Because like agricultural stuff, like if you had land, then you can plant stuff on it. You can make your own money. You can put cattle on there. So that's what I mean when you have land, you have money. So I mean, it's not useful to you unless you actually can do something about. You can use the land. Then you also had so when these lords had it, well, they kind of also wanted the same thing. They knew other lords wanted to have their land. So what they did is they get their favorite knights or buddies or whatever, and they split it off even further. So now like all these knights have this land. These guys are called vassals. Vassals can also kind of mean the general, like the donor and the vassal. The vassal receives the land. So vassals receive the lord's land. So now it's basically they're the king, and now they're giving off their land, so they get protection and knights and warriors and political support, and so that happens all over. And then sometimes these knights would do the same thing, and they would give it to peasants. So now everyone sort of owns the land. So it's not like, but it's all sort of under one control in a way, because the king needs troops to protect from these guys, from all these other dudes right here. Well, he has an entire army in each of these sectors, and now he can basically have a huge army to protect this entire area. So really, it served two purposes. It had a social relationship and it had a contractual relationship. So as a social relationship, it solidifies the social hierarchy. So basically, if you had to give your land to someone else, then you were of higher stature than of someone else. So like that kind of makes sense. The king gave his land to the lord, so the king is more powerful. The lord gave it to knights and vassals, so the lords were more powerful. The vassals gave it to peasants, and they were more powerful. And also there was no mobility. It's kind of like the caste system where you can't move up or move down. There's just no way. It's also a contractual relationship because both parties are bound by the land and law to provide something. So if I'm the king and you are my lord, and I'm giving you land, so there's benefit for you. If you give me political support, if you give me troops, if you give me defense, so that's really the contract, the social contract. So now we're going to talk about peasants and serfs. So there's a difference actually. Most people say, oh, them serfs, or oh, them peasants, and some other guys like, oh, they're the same thing. If someone ever says that, slap them. I don't care who it is, slap them. They're wrong. There's a difference. I don't want to like over exaggerate everything, but there's a difference. So all serfs are peasants, but not all peasants are serfs. So if you were a serf, you were like the lowest of the low. You were the bottom. If we compare this to Hinduism, it's kind of like the untouchables, like dead bottom. So the serfs are bound to the land. They can't leave the land. They can and they just stay there. While peasants can leave the land, do other stuff. They could own land. But one thing's for certain: serfs were not slaves. Now, what makes you a slave isn't that you do service for no money. It's really that you can be bought and sold as an item. And serfs were definitely not like that. If you had a serf and you wanted to sell him, tough luck, buddy. Alright. Other stuff that you should know. Basically, because everyone's like, oh, like Jesus and law and God and all that stuff, at the center of every manor were churches. So that just shows how like another way Christianity had an effect. There was literally a church in the middle of the land. Like, if you had any problems, talk to JC. So now, another thing is there's something called a three-field system. I'll explain what that is. A three-field system is exactly what it sounds like. You have field 1, field 2, and field 3. I don't know. I'm just trying to make it weird. I'm just probably gonna do that because I don't want to make it look awkward. There. Third field. All right. These would be in equal sizes, of course, but whatever. So you have one for so you have A, B, and C. So one will be used for planting. Actually, 2 will be used for planting. But so like I'm gonna plant I don't know, plant A, or plant number 1, and this one I'm gonna do plant number 2. And this third one will be used to have my cows and sheep and all that stuff. So I'm gonna have those guys on it. Now, what the benefit? Okay, so if you keep planting stuff on one field, it's gonna run out of nutrients. So every season, it switches. So now the cows go here, plant 1 goes here, plant 2 goes here. Now your question is, how do these how do these fields kind of get their nutrients back? And that's where the cows and sheep come in, because they poop. Their poop literally has a lot of nutrients. It goes in the soil. I don't want to go into the specifics, but yes, it enriches the soil. And so when it finally gets back to planting on this field, you finally have a whole new set of nutrients. So that's miscellaneous. So so now we're going to talk about another aspect. Vikings. All right, I'm not going to spend too much time on them because Mr. Lammers didn't, but whatever. Here we go. So Vikings, number 1 myth that we should all dispel: did not have horns. I don't care if you watched How to Train Your Dragon or How to Train Your Dragon 2, or coming to theaters soon, How to Train Your Dragon 3. But anyway, yeah, it's all a lie. They never had horns. So Vikings came from Scandinavia, and Scandinavia is modern day Denmark, Norway, and Sweden. So that's Scandinavia. So they are known for many things. So if you own land and it's by the coast, then you have to worry about invaders coming from the sea. So the Vikings were those invaders. They had fast ships, and another thing about those ships, if you felt like, oh, I'm safe, I only have a river next to me, no ship can go through a river, think again. The Vikings crafted their ships out. It's so small and it's so fast it could sail right through rivers. So you'll be taken totally by surprise. You'll be just relaxing, watching the river flowing, eating your pig and your wine and whatever, and all of a sudden your entire kingdom's being destroyed and attacked. Now, what I just said would happen not that often because Vikings didn't really attack kingdoms. They did if they needed to, but what they really focused on were monasteries. Now, there are 2 reasons why. A lot of monasteries have a lot of valuable stuff in them, especially money, and especially if they want to decorate their monastery with gold crosses or whatever, and also donations work. So the Vikings raided raided the monasteries for that reason. And also, I mean, okay, if you go to a kingdom, you're gonna have knights. You're gonna have to fight knights, and these guys are kind of trained to do stuff like that, to fight other people. Now, I don't know. I'm pretty sure. I would be really surprised if there was an army of monks. I mean, I guess in China, or Asia, they would have monks where they would train the kung fu arts or whatever. That's actually China. But anyway, monks in Europe were not fighters. So basically, you could just kill them. They couldn't do anything. So it's basically a lot of moolah, no weapons, no protection. You go for it. So that's what the Vikings did. So they raided monasteries. They also were explorers. They explored North America. Especially they went to Greenland and Iceland. And they actually say, when people say, oh, Christopher Columbus was the first guy to visit the New World, I go no. It's the Vikings. The Vikings came there first. But the settlements didn't last, so they left. They were also finally they were defeated by Alfred the Great, who and they were pushed back into the Black Sea. So there's always an end. Also, they tried attacking Constantinople once, and they lost. But the king was so impressed that he said, "You guys should join my army," and they formed something called the Varangian Guard. Nerd moment. Sorry, going off topic. Anyway, so now the Vikings were from 800 to 1000. CE. I don't know if I have to say that for you guys, but anyway. Age of Chivalry. That's from 1000 to 1100. They had this thing called the Code of Chivalry. And so they in that code, you have to serve 3 masters. You have to serve the heavenly feudal land, or basically give your allegiance to the king, which is basically the whole thing about feudalism, where knights serve the king. You also have to serve the Heavenly Lord, which is JC and GD over there. And also you have to serve your chosen lady. And this is where, like, the princess comes in hand, or the damsel in distress. Like, you are willing to die for her sake. No, okay. So, just long story. I bet you guys are laughing right now, but anyway. Alright, I'm back. Don't question it. Anyway. So, another thing that knights were supposed to do, they were supposed to protect the poor. And that seems nice, if only they did it. They never did. I mean, it was a very rare instance. The knights were kind of like spoiled guys who were like, I know how to fight, no one's gonna challenge me, except the 3 masters, but that's it. Then armor sort of evolved. So first you had chainmail, and if you haven't seen it, it's basically chains on ya. So there was just one problem to that. If I got stabbed here and I was wearing chainmail, well, okay, I wouldn't be mortally wounded, but the cut would still be there, and the metal could go inside my blood and like in my body, and that wouldn't be good. So I'd get infected and I'd die, because back then infections were killers. So they had armor, and armor is like it's kind of like you think you did the better job, but really you just made a whole lot of new problems. So it worked, you didn't get infected as often. But now you're really heavy. You are super heavy. You have to like really kind of like try and move, and it's really hard, and all your weapons are heavy. So now you're just really heavy. And also this kind of made things bad for those who are light-footed. So like if you're fighting a guy who's light-footed and they're running and they're just going, they can just push you down. Now you're on the ground and you can't get up. You're trying to. So all they have to do is just grab the sword, open your helmet, and stab your eyes, and that will kill you. That will get you in the brain, and you're dead. On a more happy note, now we have war games. So now this kind of prepared them for battle. So they had to work on their athletic skill. Large crowds would come to see like knights fighting other knights just for the fun of it. The winner received financial gifts. There were also mock battles, and that usually was jousting. So that's the age of chivalry for you guys. Castle. I'm just gonna talk a little bit about castles. So they were castles were just basically places where you could just relax. And if you want to relax, you'll need like that much expensive stuff, or if you want to, but you don't need that many defensive things. So it was made out of wood. Well, if you got attacked, well, I mean, what's a piece of wood gonna stop? It's weak. Your castle will crumble. So over time, castles were built with stones, and they were more defensive. So just want to give that out. So now we have the Age of Faith. All right. And in this Age of Faith, now you have so I just talked about the feudal hierarchy. Well, now you have like a Christian hierarchy. So you have the Pope, who's like the number one. So then you have archbishops. Then you had bishops. Then you had actually here you had cardinals. And here you had priests. And then here you had monks. Now, before, everyone had huge admiration for the Pope. The Pope was like the big guy. But during this time, people are more starting to focus on these guys. There are more monks popping up. And if you don't know what a monk is, basically, you give up everything, including like sex, being with people, and other things, and you just isolate yourself just to dedicate yourself to the Lord. That's basically it. Monks did that, and so it's kind of like you were like, oh man, he's giving up everything for JC and God. Man, I have respect for that dude. That's what basically was going on. So monasteries started forming, and monasteries are where monks live, and you also had more nuns coming. So guys were monks. You wouldn't have a female monk. If you wanted to be a female monk, you called yourself a nun. And nuns, instead of living in monasteries, they lived in convents, which is basically the exact same thing, except they're called based on if you're a guy or girl. They were honorable. Women were proud to send their daughters to go to these convents. The most famous nun at the time was Hildegard of Bingen. Bingen. There we go. So she claimed she talked to JC, and she talked to him, and she knew how to write, and so she wrote about her encounters. And many guys were like, she sucks, or I don't believe her. But she was like, no, I'm as equal as you. I have an equal connection with God. So that's basically what she said. You also had a rise in friars, and so you hear like guys like Friar Lawrence or John the Monk or whatever. I don't know. So there's a difference between monks and friars. They're both guys. Monks isolated themselves. Friars basically did the exact same thing, except they didn't isolate themselves. They walked and talked with the people. They basically came to the city every day teaching about Christianity, and they had to rely on others for food and shelter. So like they also had the big bowls where people would donate stuff, and so that's basically what friars were. So friars were really popular at that time. You also had new sort of movements going on. So you had Saint Francis of Assisi. So he's a saint because he one day he was walking or was praying, and all of a sudden his hands burned where exact same places where Jesus had his hands nailed. And the reason why he's called a saint is because they never got infected. So good for him if he ever had anything to control it. But anyway, he started the Franciscans, and he got approved by Pope Innocent III. And Pope Innocent III was a hardcore Christian. He was powerful, and he liked to approve of all these new religious revivals about where we are in life and how we're going to pursue our Christian stuff and how we're going to be more Christian. So he approved the Franciscans and the Dominicans. So everything's pretty happy, right? Well, we're going to get to we're just going to get to the most depressing part of almost entirely human history, other than the Holocaust. We have the Black Death. So, if you saw my previous video, I said how one thing led to another thing, and that thing led to another thing. So, that's basically what's going on in the Black Plague, or the Black Death, the bubonic plague, or whatever. So it's from 1347 to 1351. And so first, what causes everything is there's a drop in average temperature, and there's excessive rain. Now, if that happens, your crops are going to die. Now, by just saying crops are going to die, you're in trouble. You're in trouble. You're in big trouble. So now, if all the crops are dying, well, how are you going to get your food? Oh, I don't know. So now you're starving. You're dying. Now, at this rate, 10% of the population is dying. And so now, with all these people dying, well, how are you also going to get your food? No one else has food except maybe a few lucky people. So what are you going to do to those guys? You're going to rob them. So crime increases. So this is now all really bad. And so now crime is like everywhere, and this is huge destruction. This is only the beginning. So Italy right now is trading with everyone. Italy is like the hub of like trading and importation, exportation, all of that. Now one of their major trading buddies, they're the Mongols, and the Mongols are just if you don't know who they are they're from Asia, and they're from Mongolia, and they found it's founded by Genghis Khan, or Chinggis Khan if you want to pronounce it correctly, and basically he conquers a lot and keeps conquers a lot. He actually conquers more than the Romans did in shorter time. So good for you, Genghis. When they trade with the Mongols had the bubonic plague, and it was with them, and they were immune to it, because if you're with a disease for a long amount of time, then you develop an immunity to it. So with that said, they come and they start trading with the Italians, and when the Italians, so basically. Black rats go from the Mongolian ships into the Italian ships, and on the rats are fleas with the bubonic plague, and so the fleas kind of take use the rat as kind of like as a mobile way of getting to other people. So they get to one person, they infect them, they keep infecting all these other people. So suddenly everyone's infected, and this ain't good. People are starting to think this is the apocalypse. So it's really contagious. You get these black sores called buboes, and they're not good. And you would die in like 3 days. It's like if your best friend Bobby had the bubonic plague, you might as well just say your last words to him, or just, actually I wouldn't, because you get infected and you die 3 days later. But that's not good. So then everyone's starting to like rethink Christianity. So they're like, why is this happening to us? What have we done wrong? Why, is this the apocalypse? Is this the end? Because it's kind of a sad way to end. But anyway, what are we going to do? So we had these guys named the Flagellants, and they're like, we must repent for our sins because we have done something that upset the big man upstairs. So we're going to start whipping ourselves, and they whip themselves, and they whip themselves to the pulp. And so that's one way of doing it. People start losing faith in the church. And they also try and find ways to blame it on others. So they quickly blame the Jews. And it's kind of soft note on me, but anyway, the Jews are killed in rapid numbers, and still some survive, because how else would I be here? So the Jews are blamed, and then at this point, 1/3 of the entire population is dead. Now there were some economic effects. So, while trade decreased, because, traders are dying and no one wants to trade with an infected trader, so trade is decreasing, and inflation increases, so that's not good. There's also one good part. So, if you're watching this, I'm so sorry, but, okay, I'm with Tim. Tim and I both are tailors, or whatever, or shoemakers, that's better. We're shoemakers, and so now Tim's infected. No, actually, hold on. Let's have me, Tim, Zachary, Petros, all these other guys. So now we're all shoemakers, and we're all competing with each other. So now, if let's just say one person comes along, whoever has the smallest price is the one who's going to get the deal. So if I say 5 and Tim says 6, well then the person's going to come to me, because my prices are cheaper. So now, let's just say, everyone except me is dead because of the bubonic plague. Bye, Tim. Bye, Zachary. Bye, Petros. Bye, everyone else. So see you all later. Now, when a person comes to me and says, "Can you make a shoe for me?" I'm going to say, "Oh, I don't need to make my prices small because now all of my competitors are dead. So if I said 5, 35. 35. Pay me 35, and I'll be on my way, and I'll make your shoe for you." So prices increased 5, 6, 7 times. And so, wow, this is a lot. And this will play into a major role of the peasant revolts. So, because of this, some peasants become wealthy. So now, basically, I'm just gonna do this. You have the peasants, and you have the nobility. And so then the nobility are paying higher prices for the peasants' jobs, because now like instead of 5, it was 35. So now they're paying a lot, and now they're losing money. Their money, or the cha-ching stuff, is going down, and that money is going to the peasants who are getting wealthier. So these guys are nervous. They're like, I don't want to be poor. I don't want to be poor, and why should these guys be rich? It just doesn't make sense. God, what are you thinking? I don't know. Whatever. Actually, I don't believe in you anymore. Whatever. So that's what happens. So now they're like, okay, we're going to have to stop this upward motion. So they deliberately thwart the upward mobility of economic power from the peasants. So now the peasants, so they say, okay, we're issuing labor restrictions, we're issuing fee restrictions, price restrictions. So now, all of a sudden, it's basically you, and you're still paying, and you're still offering $5. So now the nobility are happy, but the peasants are like, hey, why can't we take advantage of this awesome stuff that my competitors are dead? I don't know. So this is not fair. So now the peasants are really upset, and they decide to revolt. They revolt. There are a couple revolts. So in 1358, you have the French Revolt. Not the French Revolution. That's later. That'll come in the next episode. This is just side note. This is the second episode. There's gonna be one more I'm gonna be making on Sunday or Saturday, and then you guys can watch all these 3 episodes on Monday as preparation on Memorial Day. But anyway, that's just for those who are doing this for the final. So with that, there's a peasant revolt, and it fails, and all the revolutionaries are massacred. In 1381, there's an English revolt. Now this one, okay, it also got put down, but it was more successful because many nobility were killed. They literally killed people, including the Archbishop of Canterbury. So now he's dead. And also, what do you call it? After it was put down, many of the revolutionaries were pardoned by Richard II of England. Except the more important guys, like Wat Tyler, who started the revolution, he was executed. But unfortunately, most revolts were crushed, so yeah, it sucks for them. So the next subject we're going to be talking about is the 100 Years' War. So we have the 100 Years' War. And basically it's between England and France. And basically it's from 1337 to 1453, and if you know math, that's a bit more than 100 years. So why did they name it 100 years? Name it, I'm too lazy to do math right now, 120 something years, or 116 years, the 116 year war. Let's stick with the 100 Years' War. Anyway, so it's France versus England, and there are 2 real problems. So they're both fighting for this area called Bordeaux. And even though I haven't studied French, I do know that's how you pronounce it. For all those French guys, or non-French guys, it's B-O-R-D-E-A-X, Bordeaux. And also the King of France, whose name is Charles IV, he dies, and his nephew is Edmund III. So Edmund III claims right to the throne. No problem, right? There is a problem. Edmund III is the King of England, so he is like, okay, oh, that's great, I get England and France, so that's great, it's a sweet deal. And the French are like, no, you're not getting that. So they have a huge fight, and the British are kicking the French's butt. So it's not looking great for the French until we meet a young 16 or 14, let's stick with 14-year-old girl named Joan of Arc. And Joan of Arc starts off as a peasant girl, and she gets this dream that God tells her that she is the one who will save the French. She is the one who must lead an army and beat the British. And so she goes and she pleads with the king, and the king says, you go for it, but you have to dress up as a man. So she does that. She dresses up as a man, and she goes and she fights, and she wins. And she does a great job of winning. She turns the tide of the war, and everything goes straight, and everything goes well for her. And then she's captured, and she's accused of heresy, and she's also accused of cross-dressing, and she is burnt at the stake by the French, which is kind of funny because the French should be grateful for Joan for saving their butt, but whatever, you know what? Some guys are just messed up. So that's the end of the 100 Years' War. The French win. The British are like, we'll get revenge on you, and they kind of do in a way because the French and British will eventually become rivals. And I'll play out in the American Revolution and the 7 Years' War and all those other wars and long history. Anyway, there was new technology that formed there. So remember how I talked about those wobbling knights? Yeah, there are no more of them because, I mean, it was just too easy to kill and it was just kind of sad. So you had these, now they wore armor, but it was lighter armor, and they were more interested in in individual movement. They were definitely different from the Greeks. When I talk about the phalanx, they were they didn't rely on group effort, they relied on individual fighting. So that's how it was. You also had the longbow. So a regular bow, it's good. The longbow is bigger, and it has a wider range of shooting, and so it became really deadly. And you also had the crossbow, and so that's basically just like, it's kind of like a gun that shoots out arrows. Some people say that the longbow was more used by the English, and then the French used the crossbow more, but they both use them equally, maybe. But that's what you have to know about the 100 Years' War. So now we get to the Great Schism. And the Great Schism, so there are two Great Schisms. So if you're in Mr. Lambert's class, he talks about the Great Schism. So there's actually a Great Schism that happens before the one he's going to tell you about. But that one basically says, so now people in the city of Constantinople, they start creating their own church, and it's the Greek Orthodox Church. And so now everything, there's a huge rivalry between the Pope and the Eastern Orthodox Greek Pope. And so there's certain differences, in Rome they speak Latin, in Greece they speak, in Constantinople they speak Greek. And there are a lot of other differences, but he doesn't want to focus on that. So we're going to talk about the Great Schism that Mr. Lambert is referring to. So basically, it starts with this guy named Boniface VIII. And Boniface VIII is he wakes up and he's pretty upset, and he's like, no one respects me. So he issues a papal bull, which is basically an official document about his opinion about a certain matter. And he says, Unum Sanctum. He says, I am the Pope. I am the Pope. I've been given this divine power. Although I look human, I'm really sort of like a godlike figure, and Jesus has bestowed this power on me. So you guys should all listen to me, and no one should be anti-Pope. Philip IV. So he really sent this out as a threat to Philip IV, who was a king of England. So the best part about this is that the Pope, Boniface, is like, ha! I guess I told him. And then he gets kidnapped by Philip. He gets kidnapped. He's put in a dungeon, and when he's released, he dies. And so it's kind of ha sucka. So that seems good. And so now this new pope is Clement V, and he moves the capital of the papacy all the way to Avignon, France, and it's good there. But then when he dies, or when he's deposed or whatever, we don't know. There's this guy named Pope Urban the Sixth, And Pope Urban VI basically says, okay, we're moving it back to Rome, and also all of you French clergymen who are right now in the papal office, screw you, screw you, screw you, screw you, screw you. He fires all of them, he gets rid of them. And so the French are like, hey, not cool, man. So they decide to have their own pope in the as a papacy in Avignon. So now you have 2 popes, and then it gets into this huge fight where eventually you have 3 popes and none of them want to give up their power. So eventually we have the Council of Constance in 1417, and Martin V is the final pope. There we go. Feels so special. The pope. He's finally the pope, and the Great Schism ends. Now there is one effect about this. The church never gains their full authority back. So already we're sort of seeing the decline of the church. I mean, first of all, the Greeks are having their own church. The Black Death ruins faith in the church. The Great Schism ruins the church. So now the church had its high moment. Now it's kind of going down, and there's gonna be one point where it just all smashes in their face. You probably know what I'm talking about, but I'm not gonna be right now. I'll get to that later. So then, I'm just going to talk about Dante, because who doesn't love Dante? I just love him, my bro. So Dante was really famous because he wrote this book called The Divine Comedy. And it's basically this book about how he perceives the afterlife. And so it has 3 parts. It's Inferno, Purgatory, and Heaven. And his guide there is in Inferno, because we don't really care about Purgatory and Heaven. It's just happy stuff. Well, Purgatory not really, but Heaven, yeah. Inferno, his guide is Virgil, and that just shows that during this time, people are beginning to like the classics, enjoy the classics, learn about the classics, learn about who their ancestors were, and learn about like Greek mythology, Roman mythology, all the past stuff. So by the way, if someone says I'm majoring in classics, that doesn't mean like they're reading like English books from 1950s or 1930 or 18 whatever. It just means they study Greek and Roman stuff. Like me, I'm a classicist, which is kind of awesome. So Dante is also really famous for the thing about calling something a contrapasso, which basically means the punishment fits the crime. If you're sent to hell, your punishment will reflect your crime. So like for example, being a traitor was the lowest in hell, and you were put kind of frozen. You were ice surrounded you. You were frozen, and that's supposed to reflect your cold-heartedness for treason. So that's really what the contrapasso is all about. It's kind of like that. And also Dante writes this because it's like a spiritual meeting with God. Like in order to go to heaven, he's not worthy, so he has to first go to hell and cleanse himself, and then go to purgatory and cleanse himself. And when he gets to heaven, he's up here and he gets to stay there and be happy for the rest of his life. Well, for the rest of his heavenly life. All right, here we go. We finally get to the Renaissance. So basically, we're halfway done. Yeah, basically. And I don't have a stopwatch on me, so I don't know how much time that was. Anyway, Renaissance. So, Renaissance. What's this thing about the word Renaissance? It means rebirth. So, if you're born, if it's a rebirth, that means what is being reborn? Well, as I just said, people are starting to admire the Greeks, the Romans, all that culture, all that awesome stuff, the mythology. Oh, I love the mythology. Anyway, so that's what they're really interested in that. And so, rebirth means a reappreciation for the classical art. So, basically people are like, oh man, we need to study what Aristotle studied, we need to study what Ptolemy studied, we need to study all this other stuff, and it needs to be awesome. It's actually the same reason when I said like study what Ptolemy studied. Well, that's how the that's how the papacy got the idea of a geocentric theory. Remember how Aristarchus said that there was a heliocentric theory, and then Ptolemy said that was BS? Yeah, people are now listening to Ptolemy, and so that's how the church gets the idea that the Earth is the center of the universe. So people are now being more philosophical. Their philosophical movements, their religious movements, their social movements, their art movements, all this awesome stuff. We're not going to focus on that. I mean, you have Leonardo da Vinci, Raphael, Donatello, you have Michelangelo. Love Michelangelo. So they build. It's just rise in architecture, rise in art, rise in philosophy. A huge art happy center moment. The main hub for that was Italy, and it was not unified. They were city states, and it was mostly in northern Europe. Northern Italy, where it was the basic hub. And there were growth in large cities like Venice, Florence especially, Milan. You also have wealthy merchants. So, like in Italy, in Florence, you had the Medici family, and the Medici family were basically they started off as a banking industry, and then they later got so powerful that they controlled political parties, and they were patrons of the arts. So there are three Medici guys you should know. Cosimo, he's the founder of the Medici family, so he's like the banker. The banker, yeah. Then you have Florenzo, and he's the most famous, he's the most important, because he's the guy who's like, I like this art, I'm supporting you, like this, all that, awesome. That's basically what he's going through. And Leo. Oh, Leo. Leo is so wealthy, he decides to buy the church. He literally buys it. He buys it. So now he's Leo the 10th, and he is basically as corrupt as you can get. He doesn't really care about being the head of the entire Christian stuff. He just cares about how much money he has and how much power and dominion he has. So that's really it. That's all I'm going to talk about the Renaissance. So now we have the Reformation. The Reformation. Here we go. So, the most important person in the Reformation is Martin Luther, but he's not the only important person. So we're going to talk about a few important people. So here we go. We have the printing press. So Johann Gutenberg. Gutenberg was famous because he basically made the printing press. So before, if you wanted something done in Europe, you had to handwrite it yourself. So like beforehand, if you wanted a copy of the Bible, a monk would have to write every single word by hand. Man, it would kill my hand. If you ever have Mr. Coldbreath, you kind of feel bad for these guys because after taking a Mr. Coldbreath exam or writing exam, your hand kills and your hand shakes for the rest of the day. So that's what these guys did. They really wrote and wrote and wrote and wrote and wrote. And also in China, they had block printing, which is basically writing characters on the block and pressing them. And it wasn't very efficient, but whatever. So what Gutenberg did is he had movable type, and that's basically you have metal letters and you arrange them in a certain way for a certain page. Then you add them to the board. You get ink on them, you print them on a piece of paper, and you keep printing that page over and over again, and then you can do the next page. And so in a few years, Gutenberg creates the Gutenberg Bible. Such an original name, Gutenberg. Anyway, this new printing press was faster. It made less mistakes. It was better for transportation. It took, and it also, because of the printing press, people started expressing their own ideas, and some of those were quite controversial. Speaking of controversial ideas, let's talk to the next guy about the Reformation. His name is Erasmus. And Erasmus was really famous for his book, The Praise of Folly. But what he means by folly, so folly has two meanings in this case. Folly is his pen name. So, that's nice, pen name. But it also served as he had his own definition for folly, and folly was basically hypocrisy in a way. It was sort of like the horrible part about humanity that ignores reason. He accused everyone about trying to be the best that they were ignoring the most logical reasons why they should be doing it, or he basically wrote that book to criticize everyone. He criticized teachers, to Jews, to lawyers, or all these other people, and he criticized everyone, including the Catholic Church. So that's why I say the Reformation, because he starts criticizing the Catholic Church. He starts identifying the flaws, and he kind of writes it how everyone thinks the church is sort of stupid. And at the time, I could see where he's coming from. So he criticizes the Catholic Church. The next guy on the list is Thomas More. Actually, just now I just finished writing an essay with my introduction talking about Thomas More. But anyway, in I believe it was 1517? Maybe 1514? He writes his book Utopia. And he's the one who coins the term utopia. Utopia in Greek means no place, as in a place you will never be able to reach. And so he writes about an awesome world where everyone's Christian and every single part of life is true. And then he starts going like, yeah, and our world will not be corrupt. The Catholic Church. He does that. He's kind of like saying, indirectly, he's saying the Catholic Church is corrupt. So that's another punch of the Catholic Church. You also have this guy called Machiavelli. And Machiavelli, he's not really into Reformation, but he's another guy you might want to know, just a side note. Machiavelli is like very pessimistic, and he's like, okay, so you know the saying, it doesn't matter if you win or lose, it depends on how you play the game. No, Machiavelli was like, I don't care how you play the game. You can like be the worst, you can cheat for all I care. You just have to get what you want. You have to be so pushed to get what you want, you'll be willing to do anything to get your goal. And he also like calls many people wusses for not living up to their dreams. And so that's what he calls his book is called The Prince. But anyway, just Machiavelli. That's really not all you have to know about him. So now we get to Luther. And Luther is like one of those devout Catholic monks. He's not like a monk. He is a devout Catholic monk. He always felt so ashamed of himself. Like he felt by doing like a single action, he felt he was never holy enough, never spiritual enough to be admitted to heaven. He was just so worried, like so uptight about who he was and who he was in the eyes of God. And so basically he even got transferred from one school to another school because he was like too devout. And so one person said, why don't you just go to Italy, go to Rome, go just relax, buddy, just relax. You need to go and see the wonders of Christianity and just chill, alright? Just go and be one with God. And Martin Luther's like, okay, that's a pretty good idea, I should. When he gets there, he's like, this is gonna be great. What the? Like he's like that. Like he's so shocked about the horrible corruption there. First of all, you have freaking Leo the X and all these corrupt popes and all these corrupt cardinals. You have prostitutes everywhere. You have holy men secretly paying to sleep with these prostitutes, and you have all these horrible problems. And everyone's unholy, and Luther is shocked. And what really cuts everything is that he sees this dude named Johann Tetzel. And Johann Tetzel is selling indulgences. And so indulgences are basically basically a piece of paper signed by the Pope saying, if you give me money, I will grant you a gateway to heaven, or grant someone in your family a gateway to heaven. And these were not cheap; these were expensive. So basically, people will be pouring out their life savings just to go to heaven. But Martin Luther really called this BS. This is hopefully you guys have seen the new History of the World, I think, where basically Martin Luther in that skit says like, oh man, this is BS. This whole thing is BS. This is such a scam. F this. F the church. This is 95 reasons why. So that's what he does. He's so shocked about why it's such a horrible idea about indulgences that he's just like, I'm going to write 95 theses about this. I'm going to write 95 consecutive reasons why this is such a horrible thing. And so he does. He goes so far saying like, why does the Pope have to get money to do this? Why can't he do this out of his own common humanity awesomeness? Why does he have to make money off of this? Why does the Pope have to, what is this Pope going to use the money on? He's not even using it. He's just going to use it to build another church, a basilica. So he's pretty so Martin Luther gets really upset about this. He posts it on the church door and leaves it for all to see. And he doesn't expect, he expects some reaction, but not a huge reaction. And one fool just decides to take it. He's like, man, this is good. So he goes over to a printing press and starts copying it and starts giving it to everyone else. Now everyone's reading it, or at least those who could read, or at least the intellectuals are reading it. And now everyone's going, yeah, the church is such a scam. This is not good. And so now people are starting to think, well, what should we do? And Martin Luther starts preaching his own ideas about something called sola fide, only faith. So basically Catholicism at this point was like, if you want something done, you go to a priest, the priest talks to God, the God talks to the priest, and priest talks to you, and that's it. But Martin Luther basically said, you should go talk to God yourself. You don't need a priest to be like the middleman. You can you can talk to God. You can have that deep personal relationship with God. So that's what really that was all about. He also believed in he basically said you didn't have to be like so like he was sort of for lack of a better way of explaining this, so let's just say I'm walking, I find someone I don't like, I kill him, and then I feel so bad that I decide to repent or go to confession. So if I die before I went to confession, I go to hell, right? So Martin Luther says, not necessarily. Like, if that was like a one-time thing, if you're a good person in general, you're going to heaven. If you're a bad person in general, you're going to hell. Just simple as that. And so that kind of made things easier for people. Like, people were like, I didn't mean to do this. I mean, yeah, I kind of found her cute, but I didn't mean to sleep with her and, like, she had a husband and stuff. But I'm a generally good person, so I'm going to go to heaven. So people started believing in this. And people start taking this way too far than what Luther intended, and Luther became a figurehead for this revolution, Reformation. It even got the attention of the Holy Roman Emperor Charles V, who went to Worms, Germany, to hear this hearing. And Martin Luther's like, "Yeah, this is what I think." All right. So Martin Luther basically explains himself, and they have to kind of respect it. And Martin Luther's kind of excommunicated, but Martin Luther doesn't really care. And so Martin Luther goes all the way to become super famous, and everyone's following this, and half of Europe is now divided. Well, I wouldn't necessarily that. Okay, hold on. The east half of Europe currently is Greek Orthodox. So of the western half of Europe that still obeys the Pope, not like half of them are like, yeah, we're not, we don't trust this Catholic stuff. Let's go Protestant on this. So now there's a huge reformation. Now, like, the church is losing a lot of followers. And so, then you have, what do you call it? Henry VIII. There we go. Henry VIII. I was forgetting the number. Henry VIII. He's now the king, and now he's about to lead his own revolution. So it all starts when he's married to Catherine of Aragon, and he thinks everything's super dandy, and then he kind of schooly poops with her, and then she gives birth to a daughter, and Henry's like, wait a minute, I kind of wanted the son, so no offense, but I want to kind of divorce you. So he goes to the Pope. He says, hey Pope, can I please divorce Catherine of Aragon of Spain? And the Pope is like, hey, what? Guess what? I'm not letting you. You're not allowed to. That's totally immoral. You cannot have a divorce. So King Henry's like, F you. Why do I have to do this? All right. So he decides to make his own church, and he makes his own church, which is in he issues the Act of Supremacy, which basically gives him the power to be the head of the church. So now you've just lost most of England. Nice job, Pope. Anyway, so now he's doing that. Side note for Henry VIII, he gets married 5 more times. His next wife is for Anne Boleyn. She gives birth to Elizabeth, and then Henry's so mad that he has her executed. And then he has a third wife, and she gives birth to Edward the Fourth, and so he's finally happy. But then she dies, and then he gets married like 3 more other times, whatever. And then in England, Edward the Fourth is a wimp, and he dies. And then Mary, who's now who's known as Bloody Mary, she's a devout Catholic because the Spanish are Catholics, and so she starts killing Catholics. Killing Protestants by not like in the numbers. And then when she dies, Elizabeth the First makes England Protestant, and she creates the Anglican Church. She like finalizes the Anglican Church. So that's basically that. We're almost done, guys. One more thing. We're gonna talk about the counter-revolution. So now all these Catholics are like, okay, we're losing all these followers. So how are we gonna get them back? So then we have these guys like you have many people who are going to eventually try and take back. They're going to try and get more Protestants to come along. And I'm going to talk more about that later in the final video. Mostly because I didn't write notes on it, because I lost my notes on that part. But I'll get it back, don't worry, I got you covered. So just know that the Catholics are going to have a counter-revolution. Other Reformation-y dudes are going to be two more guys. John Calvin of Geneva. So he had a pessimistic view on humans. He's like, that guy's going to hell, that guy's going to go to hell. So he had this idea of predestination. He said before God created the universe, God envisioned a handful of people who he called the elect to go to heaven, and everyone else would go to hell. So basically, it was predetermined or predestined that you would go to heaven or hell. So that would be so if you were a good person, it's possible that you were chosen from the elect and that you would go to heaven. And if you were a bad person, then it was pretty obvious that you weren't part of the elect and you were going to go to hell. So John Calvin was there. He's from Geneva. And then John Knox leads the Presbyterianism Reformation. And so now you have these new interpretations of the Bible. Suddenly, when we first started talking about this, we started with Arianism, and we just had one form of Christianity. And now you have Anglicanism, Presbyterianism, you have John Calvinism, you had in general Protestantism, and you had all these different isms, and so now the church is super divided, and you have Greek Orthodox, and that's basically how. So this is if you're doing your final review, this is the mother lode right here. You just see how much religion shapes everyone, how religion is interpreted, how religion has an effect on everyone's daily lives, and how religion makes certain events like the 95 Theses occur, or the printing press occur, and all these different awesome stuff that's happening in this moment of history that's so beautiful. That's why we write it down. So anyway, that's the history lesson for today. I hope you really find this helpful. One more video, I'm going to cover the counter-revolution. I'm going to cover the age of the scientific revolution, the age of enlightenment, and the French Revolution. And those are going to be kind of brief. But anyway, I hope you really enjoyed this video. It's been really awesome doing this video with you. I hope you give me as many likes. I think currently I have 54, but I'm not sure, but whatever. Peace out, all you guys. Mr. Lammers, I love you. Alright, see you later.